Hello, welcome to Flipped IGCSE Biology, Unit B8 Reproduction, Lesson 1, Types of Reproduction and Plant Reproduction. So before we get started, you need to know about the different types of reproduction. Reproduction can be sexual or asexual. Sexual reproduction involves cells from a male and female parent that fuse or join together. This will produce an organism that is different to the two parents but inherits characteristics from the two parents. In asexual reproduction, one organism just makes a copy or clone of itself. Therefore, the new organism will be genetically identical to the parent. Look at these pictures and see which ones you think are sexual or asexual. You can pause the video here. These pictures here show sexual reproduction. The flower reproduces when the pollen and the ovum fuse together. The bee will also reproduce by sexual reproduction, and as you can see, these two butterflies here are mating, a male and female. The other three pictures show asexual reproduction. The anemone reproduces by making smaller copies of itself. You can see that this plant here has made tiny baby plants on the side of its leaves which fall off and then will grow into new plants, and a similar thing happens with the spider plant. In sexual reproduction, a mobile male gamete, for example sperm, will fuse with a stationary female gamete, for example an egg. Now let's compare the two sex cells. Think about the size, the movement, the number, and if there is a food store. You can try and complete this table yourself. I'll show the answers in a moment. You can pause the video now. And here are the answers. The sperm is much smaller than the egg, or ovum. The sperm can move by itself, but the egg is immobile and just sits and waits for the sperm to come along. There are many sperm produced, whereas only a few ova. And the sperm does not have a food store, but the ova does. Pollination. Now this video is going to focus on plant reproduction, sexual reproduction in plants. So pollination is when a pollen grain from an anther is transferred to a stigma. This can be self-pollination, where the plant will actually pollinate itself, fertilize itself, and the pollen is transferred to the stigma of the same flower. Or cross-pollination, where the pollen is transferred to a different flower by what we call an agent. The agent could be an insect or the wind. Now, let's look at flower structure. These two flowers, one of them is a wind-pollinated flower and the other one is an insect-pollinated flower. Which one do you think is which? The flower on the left is pollinated by the wind and the flower on the right is pollinated by insects. Looking at the insect-pollinated flower in more detail, you need to know about the different structures that are present. The anther produces pollen. The stigma is where the pollen will land. The petal is there to attract insects. The ovary is where the ova are made. The nectary produces nectar, which is a sugary liquid that the insects will go to the flowers to drink. And the sepal is a green kind of outer layer that will protect the flower as it is growing. So let's look at the flower features in more detail. What do you notice about the differences between these two flowers? They're both very adapted to their purpose. In the appearance, the insect-pollinated flower, basically you'll notice is very large, bright flowers, very pretty. It's also got nectar, which is a sugary liquid, and it might smell nice. All of this is to attract the insect. The anthers are inside the flower, so that when the insect goes in, it will pick up some bits of pollen. The pollen grains are sticky and rough, so they stay attached to the insect's body. And also, it will produce a very small amount of pollen because the insect will come very specifically to the flower, and it doesn't need any more than that. The stigma has a sticky end, and this allows the pollen to be attracted and stuck onto it. The wind-pollinated flower is small, not very pretty, no bright colour, doesn't smell or have any nectar. The anthers you have noticed are hanging outside the flower. This means that the wind can easily take the pollen away. These pollen grains that are produced are very light and have a smooth coat. This allows them to be carried very easily by the wind and not stick together. Obviously, because wind pollination is a lot less accurate than insect pollination, these flowers need to produce a large number of pollen grains, so there's more chance of fertilization. And in order to catch these flying pollen grains, the stigma are outside the flower and they are very feathery, which allows them to trap as much pollen as possible. Now, each method of pollination has its own advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, with wind pollination, the plants don't need to waste energy making nectar or petals. However, it's much less likely that the pollen will meet a suitable stigma and they need to produce a large amount of pollen. For insect pollination, it's very likely that an insect will pollinate the plant, so they hardly need to make any pollen. However, petals have to be grown, and that takes a lot of energy, and it also takes a lot of energy and resources to produce nectar. So, once the pollen lands onto the stigma, you can see the male nucleus inside the pollen there. A pollen tube will start to grow. This is true for both types of flower. The pollen tube is actually one of the fastest growing things in the natural world. It grows down the style towards the ovary, and then the male nucleus will start to travel down the pollen tube towards the ovule and the ovum. Now, once it gets to the ovule, you'll see the female nucleus is there. The male nucleus will arrive from the pollen tube to the female nucleus. And when they join together, this is fertilization. Once the two join together, they now form a zygote. Fertilization in general is when a male and female gamete join together. Gamete just means sex cell. This produces a zygote. In plants, the flower is where the fertilization happens. Fertilization is sexual reproduction because it involves a male and female gametes. Now, once the ovum has been fertilized, a seed will start to grow. And you need to know a little bit about the structure of a seed. So, the seed has a radicle. This is what develops into the first root. You can kind of think of this part here as the seed embryo, or the plant embryo. The plumule, which is what will develop into the first leaves and stem. The cotyledon, which is a store of energy, so the plant can grow before it can start doing photosynthesis. And finally, the testa, or seed coat, protects the seed against infection by bacteria or fungi. Now, once the seed is fully formed, it will need to be moved to a different place before it germinates. This could be by the wind, and some seeds have little wings, for example, sycamore. Other seeds have parachutes, for example, dandelion. Or the plants can use animals to disperse or move their seeds from one place to another. This could be internal, in the case of a strawberry, so the animal will eat the seed, which will be in the form of a fruit, and then in its feces it will release the seed somewhere else so it can start growing. Or this can be external, in the case of burdock. You can see the burdock has got very little hooks on there. What happens is it gets stuck on the fur of the animal, and the animal transfers it and then will rub it off at a later date and release the seed in a new place. Once the seed starts germinating, germination very simply means growing. In order to germinate, a seed will need oxygen, a suitable temperature, and water. And here is the bibliography.